me extend my warm welcome to everyone in the conference room. It's a great pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Min Jeonghun from Seoul to our seminar this afternoon. He is going to speak on a very important subject, namely current situation and future prospect of the Korean Peninsula. Dr. Min Jeonghun is coming from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, known as KNDA. He is on the faculty of the academy, particularly in the American Studies, and his special interests are U.S. politics, U.S. South Korea relations, and U.S. North Korean relations. He has written extensively in numerous academic journals on aspects relating to East Asia, particularly Korean Peninsula. So we are very, very happy to have him here to tell us about the events that have taken place in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly. We all know that Korean Peninsula has witnessed dramatic developments in the last 2 or 3 years. The advent of President Moon, particularly, has been very crucial for these developments. Because of his conciliatory approach towards North Korea. And because of that, there has been a dramatic reduction in tensions on the peninsula. And also there's a great improvement in inter-Korean relations. He has also been instrumental in the convening of 2 very important summits between American President Trump and then North Korean leader Kim. Of course, the summits have still not yielded the expected results. We all know Singapore summit really paved the way for future talks. And this year, of course, the Hanoi Summit took place, did not really yield any positive results. But that does not really give room for despondency, because both Trump and Kim, with a great smile, they said goodbye to each other at the end of the summit conference in Hanoi. And today, President Trump looks forward to having more talks with the North Korean leader. Therefore, let's hope that this peace process will continue in the coming months, coming years. So therefore, I think Professor Min will be able to tell us more about what exactly has happened since the Hanoi Summit. And also earlier, of course, what was the significance of the Singapore Summit, and what are the shortcomings of the Singapore Summit, and why the Hanoi Summit really miserably failed the way it did this February. In addition to that, I would like to request Dr. Min to tell us about the changing relations between South Korea and China, for example, and also changing relations between South Korea and Japan, because these 2 countries are very crucial for future developments in Northeast Asia. So in that connection, I would like to hear his views on President Moon's southern policy, for example. What is the significance of the southward policy, and how it is going to change South Korea's relations with China and also Japan in particular, and how it is only going to give a new boost to South Korean relations with ASEAN countries as well as India. So in that connection, I would like to mention the visit made by Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, in the month of February this year. And that was a remarkable kind of visit, which really produced a lot of goodwill on both sides. Now, these are some of the things we really would like to hear from Dr. Min. Without much, further, encroachment on his subject, I would like to request Dr. Min to take the floor. One small thing. I think before he actually starts his lecture, there's going to be a short film for 5 minutes on the demilitarized zone in the Korean Peninsula.
The Demilitarized Zone, a strip of land dividing South and North Korea, was established in 1953 according to the Korean Armistice Agreement as a buffer zone to prevent the occurrence of incidents which might lead to a resumption of hostilities. As a formal peace treaty has not yet been signed, the two Koreas remain technically at war, and ironically, the DMZ became one of the most heavily militarized regions in the world. In 2017, military tension on the Korean Peninsula heightened significantly. However, with the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, the situation on the Korean Peninsula changed dramatically.
땅, 하늘, 바다, 어디에서도 우발적인 충돌을 막을 근본 대책들도 강구해 나갈 것입니다. 한반도를 가로지르고 있는 비무장지대는 실질적인 평화지대가 될 것입니다.
Transforming the DMZ into a peace zone. On September 19, 2018, the Inter-Korean Military Agreement was adopted on the occasion of the Inter-Korean Summit meeting held in Pyongyang. In accordance with this agreement, a myriad of effective measures have been taken to ease tensions along the border and build confidence in the military domain. In particular, measures have been taken to transform the DMZ into a peace zone. First, withdrawal of GPs. Since the armistice, there have been over 80 accidental armed conflicts between the South and North GPs, so withdrawing GPs that lie within 1 kilometer of each other would reduce much of the military tension within the DMZ. On November 10, 2018, both sides withdrew troops and weapons from 11 of its GPs and destroyed 10 of the 11, leaving 1 GP from each side for preservation purposes. On December 12th, both sides conducted verification of the 11 GPs, and it was the first time South and North Korean soldiers walked together within the DMZ unarmed. Second, demilitarization of the JSA. Within the DMZ, there is the Joint Security Area, the only area where South and North armed guards stand face to face. A trilateral consultative body between South Korea, North Korea, and the United Nations Command was established to consult and implement measures to demilitarize the JSA in Panmunjom. The three parties removed the mines, withdrew GPs, personnel, and firearms, and withdrew unnecessary surveillance equipment from the JSA. Demilitarization of the JSA will eventually allow free movement within the JSA, not only for guard duty personnel from South and North Korea, but also for visitors and tourists. Third, recovery of remains. While the DMZ area was one of the fiercest battlegrounds during the Korean War, war remains buried in the DMZ could not be recovered for over 65 years. Pursuant to the agreement, South and North Korea agreed to launch a joint remains recovery project in Arrowhead Ridge in Cheolwon, Gangwon Province, located in the DMZ. It is estimated that about 200 missing Korean remains and about 100 US and French remains are buried in this area. As the two Koreas agree and actually implement the agreement in an unprecedented way, trust is gradually being built in the military area. But the South and North believe the Korean Peninsula must turn into a land of peace and trust. The transformation of the DMZ is the first of many steps towards complete denuclearization and permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. The Demilitarized Zone, a strip of land dividing South and North.
That's all? What about the format of the present seminar? After the main presentation by Dr. Min, there will be a question and answer session. And Dr. Min will speak for about 40 minutes, 40 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a discussion.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Dr. Jae Min, and I thank you for the Dr. Kesavan about interesting me and interesting what the purpose what could be the purpose of today's seminar. And actually, he requested so many things to me. Mainly focusing on the political situations on the Korean Peninsula and the North Korea-U.S. relations. And he also mentioned about the important relations between South Korea and China and the South Korea and Japan and other things, and the southern policy of the Moon administration and so on. But during the presentation, I will just focus on talking about the North Korea-U.S. relations. And after the presentation, if time allows, and we can a little bit talk about those important relations surrounding the South Korea, North Korea, Japan, and China, and so on. Let me briefly introduce my institution, Korean National Diplomatic Academy, the KNDA. KNDA is affiliated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of South Korea, and it is mainly providing training to Korean diplomats and foreign service officer candidates who are the future of our diplomacy. And it is also one of think tank institutions focusing on diplomacy and security in South Korea. I'm so glad to have an opportunity to talk about the current political situation on the Korean Peninsula, focusing on North Korea-U.S. negotiations. I think that there are three topics of today's presentation. The first, I will talk about how the current North Korea-U.S. negotiations have proceeded, especially in the Moon Jae-in administration, and then what positions Washington and Pyongyang have shown for the denuclearization of North Korea. And I will also talk about what roles South Korea has been playing to facilitate the talks between the two countries. And my presentation will last about 40 minutes. And after the presentation, I expect that we will have useful, productive discussions. Okay? And let me first talk about how the current North Korea-U.S. negotiations have proceeded. North Korea's nuclear issue is the most serious security threat and challenge that South Korea is facing. As you know, North Korea repeated provocative nuclear and missile tests in 2016 and 2017. So the security situation on the Korean Peninsula became more serious over time. And the South Korea-U.S. responses reflected such heightened tensions. They had the largest scale joint military exercises in 2017. Specifically, U.S. strategic assets like aircraft carriers and the strategic bombers like B-1B were deployed around the Korean Peninsula for the joint exercises. And the economic sanctions and pressure on North Korea were tightened. For example, 3 UN Security Council resolutions, the 2371, 2375, and the 2397 were imposed only in 2017. And North Korea launched Hwasong-15, which is a type of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, in November 2017. And then Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea declared the completion of state nuclear force. He declared North Korea's nuclear weapons capability a reality. So given the situations, the Trump administration of the United States, which got the maximum pressure and engagement as its policy on North Korea, got difficulty finding a ground of resuming talks with North Korea. So Trump administration made it clear that it would not accept North Korea as a nuclear state and emphasized stronger pressure and sanctions against it. So it was very important that South Korea would play a significant role to bring them back to the negotiation table by implementing its pressure and engagement policy simultaneously. First, South Korea continued to closely cooperate with the U.S. and the international community through strong sanctions and pressure in order to bring North Korea back to the negotiation table for their denuclearization. And South Korea has made it clear that it would not accept North Korea as a nuclear state, and no war should be acceptable on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea still has vivid memory of how desperate and horrible the results of the Korean War was, and it is fully aware that another war would make irreparable and irreversible damage and loss to its people. Meanwhile, South Korea tried to resume talks with North Korea in order to improve inter-Korean relations. South Korea perceives that virtuous circle, which means that improvement of inter-Korean relations and trust would lead to enhancing North Korea-U.S. relations and trust. Such a virtuous circle would contribute to achieving the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and establishing a peace regime on it. And the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, which would be held in February 2018, was a great opportunity to ask for North Korea's participation to resume inter-Korean talks. And by improving inter-Korean relations, South Korea tried to provide a diplomatic space for North Korea and the U.S. to resume their talks. And South Korea's efforts have begun to pay off last year, 2018. Chairman Kim showed changed attitudes in his New Year's address last year. After grabbing the power toward the end of 2012, Chairman Kim pursued Byungjin Noson, which means it would complete the state nuclear force and build a socialist economy for prosperity. And as I mentioned earlier, he declared the completion of state nuclear force in November 2017. So with the completion of its nuclear force, he wanted to focus on constructing the socialist economy and produce economic outcomes to maintain his regime. And to do that, North Korea would need to get its security guarantee from US and get imposed sanctions lifted by denuclearizing itself. And in the New Year's address, North Korea expressed its intention to participate in Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and to improve inter-Korean relations. And many things happened before the April 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. First, North Korea's high-level delegations visited South Korea during Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And then South Korea's special envoy delegation to the north visited Pyongyang in early March. And right after coming back from Pyongyang, the South Korea's special envoy delegation visited Washington to meet the President Trump. And it was announced that the first North Korea-US summit would be held by the end of May 2018. And the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit was held in Panmunjom on April 27th. And as you can see on the screen, the Panmunjom Declaration consists of three major agreements. First, improving and cultivating inter-Korean relations to promote common prosperity and reunification of Korea. And alleviating the military tension and eliminating the danger of war on the Korean Peninsula. And thirdly, establishing a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. And this part includes what two Koreas agreed to further complete the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, like South Korea, North Korea, US, and possibly China, would actively pursue an end of war declaration, and the two Koreas confirmed the common goal of realizing a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula. And many things also happened before the first summit between North Korea and the US on January 12th in Singapore. Another South Korea-US summit was held in Washington on May 23rd, and North Korea's Punggye-ri nuclear test site was dismantled on May 24th. But several hours after the event, President Trump made a decision to terminate the Singapore summit, mainly because of hostile terminologies that North Korea used for the chief officials of Trump administration. And then, surprising, the second inter-Korean summit was held in Panmunjom on May 26, and the purpose of the second summit was to facilitate the talks between North Korea and the United States. And then Kim Young-chol, a North Korean senior ruling party official, he visited the United States and delivered Chairman Kim Jong-un's letter to President Trump in the White House. And then President Trump affirmed holding the Singapore summit as scheduled on June 12th. And the historic first summit between North Korea and US was held in Sentosa Island, Singapore on June 12th. And you can see the joint statements of the Singapore summit on the screen. They made 4 agreements. First, they would commit themselves to establishing a new North Korea-US relations. And second, they would make joint effort to build a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. And North Korea would commit itself to working toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And finally, they agreed to commit themselves to returning with the remains of American soldiers killed in the Korean War. So, although the first North Korea-US summit was held successfully, it is not the end of the story. Instead, they just started off their long journey for North Korea's denuclearization. North Korea's denuclearization is the engine for improving inter-Korean relations and North Korea-US relations, and eventually establishing a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. It is like the key to everything. But there have been pessimistic views in Washington about whether North Korea is sincere and trustworthy about denuclearizing itself based on its sour experience in the past. Meanwhile, North Korea complained that U.S. was not willing to provide corresponding measures for what North Korea had done for the denuclearization, like stopping nuclear and missile launch provocation and the dismantling Punggye-ri nuclear test site, and agreement on Pyongyang's returning of the remains of the American soldiers, and another agreement on shutdown on the Dongchangni missile engine test site. So because of the gaps, the progress was slow. And unfortunately, the State Secretary, Mike Pompeo's, the visit to North Korea was canceled in late August, and the concern got bigger about the negotiations. So in order to facilitate North Korea-US negotiations, as it did before the Singapore summit, South Korea's special envoy delegation to the north visited Pyongyang on September 5th again. And their visit came up with the outcomes that the third inter-Korean summit would be held in Pyongyang on September 18th through 20th, with the slogan, "Peace, a New Future." And Chairman Kim's letter was also delivered to President Trump. And it was known that the letter was written with positive words about the President Trump, and Chairman Kim requested the second summit between North Korea and the United States. And President Trump responded to the letter positively, and he accepted Chairman Kim's request to hold the second summit. And the third Inter-Korean Summit was held on September 18th through 20th in Pyongyang. And the summit dealt with the execution and direction of the Panmunjom Declaration and discussed ways to realize the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and establish permanent peace and shared prosperity of two Koreas. And you can see the agreements of the Pyongyang Joint Declaration. First, expanding the cessation of military hostility in regions of confrontation, such as DMZ, which was the reflecting what they saw in the film before my presentation today. And second, the pursuing substantial measures to further advance exchanges and cooperation, and strengthening humanitarian cooperation to resolve the issue of separated families, and promoting exchanges and cooperation in various fields to enhance the atmosphere of reconciliation and unity. And most importantly, two Koreas shared the view in terms of the denuclearization process. Two Koreas shared the view that the Korean Peninsula must be turned into a land of peace free from nuclear weapons and nuclear threats. Specifically, this part includes dismantlement of Dongchangni missile engine test site and dismantlement of Yongbyon nuclear facilities if U.S. takes corresponding measures, and two Korea's close cooperation to pursue complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And finally, Chairman Kim agreed to visit Seoul at an early date. Unfortunately, the promise has not been kept yet, but you will see that kind of promise will be kept sooner or later. Anyway, and the successful third Inter-Korean Summit was committed to facilitating North Korea-U.S. negotiations. And specifically, State Secretary Mike Pompeo made his fourth visit to North Korea in October 2018, and it was known that his visit produced positive outcomes and made some progress in North Korea's denuclearization process. And they also talked about holding the second summit between North Korea and the United States. And as you know, the second North Korea-U.S. summit was held on February 27th through the 28th in Hanoi, Vietnam. However, unlike the positive expectation about the results of the summit, they failed to reach an agreement. But the Hanoi Summit also produced some positive outcomes. Specifically, the North Korea and the United States, they could fully know what they want and what they could offer in Hanoi, and establish a cornerstone to make a progress in the following meetings. It means that both sides know what they want respectively, and actually they put all the cards on the table. And so the only thing left is to match the cards according to their preferences. And the Hanoi Summit also contributed to enhancing mutual trust between the two leaders, the Chairman Kim and President Trump. But after failing to reach an agreement in Hanoi, tension is getting higher between North Korea and U.S. So it is imperative to narrow their gap in North Korea's denuclearization process to maintain the momentum to resume the talks. So far, I talked about how the current North Korea-U.S. negotiations have proceeded. Now let me talk about what positions U.S. and North Korea have got in the denuclearization of North Korea through the Trump model and Steve Biegun's work that you can see on the screen. First, let me begin with the Trump model. Okay. So you can see the main features of Trump model on the screen, the left side. Regarding North Korea's denuclearization process, the two countries have different positions. Washington has argued the comprehensive settlement or all-in-one approach, while Pyongyang has argued step-by-step approach. And because of the gaps, it seemed that it would not be easy to bring them back to the negotiation table. But such a difference began to be flexible when Pompeo has his second visit to North Korea in May 2018, and then the Trump model was emerged. As you can see on the screen, the Trump model is a compromise to coordinate the different positions of North Korea and US about the denuclearization. It is mainly featured by comprehensive settlement and step-by-step measures. You can see the bottom, left to bottom part of the screen. First, comprehensive settlement means that the two sides needed to reach an overall agreement on a roadmap at an early stage of their negotiations. It reflects the Trump administration's intention that North Korea should prove its denuclearization will at the beginning of the process, in order not to repeat the mistakes that the previous US administrations made in the negotiations with North Korea in the past. And in the Trump model, North Korea's denuclearization is defined as the complete dismantlement of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear facilities, fissile materials, nuclear warheads, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the Trump administration aims to achieve North Korea's major denuclearization by the end of President Trump's current term in office. And the timeline seems to be related to President Trump's re-election in November 2020. And the step-by-step measures of the Trump model reflect what North Korea wants in the denuclearization process. If Pyongyang accepts the roadmap all in the process, Washington would then provide its corresponding measures in each step. But the Trump administration demands Pyongyang to prove that its denuclearization will is different from the past by freezing its fissile material production and dismantling some of its ICBMs at an early stage in the process. And if Pyongyang implements such front-loading measures, Washington would then offer its corresponding measures. And after the initial stage, declaration, inspection, disabling, and verification stages on North Korea's nuclear facilities, fissile materials, and nuclear warheads will be followed. And the denuclearization process of the Trump model will be complete when North Korea dismantles its remaining nuclear capabilities, such as nuclear materials and nuclear warheads, by the end of 2020. And when Pyongyang completes its major denuclearization measures, Washington will implement its corresponding measures to guarantee North Korea's safety, security, and lift economic sanctions against it. And along with the main features of the Trump model, you can also see what Steve Biegun's team did for North Korea's denuclearization on the screen, the right side of the screen. For working level talks with North Korea, Steve Biegun was appointed as U.S. Special Representative for North Korea in August 2018, and his team often met their counterparts to deal with the matter. And it was reported that when Steve Biegun delivered his speech at Stanford University on January 31st, 2019, he said that Chairman Kim promised to dismantle plutonium and uranium enrichment facilities extending beyond Yongbyon. He also mentioned that the two countries would discuss how to dismantle Punggye-ri nuclear test site and Dongchangni nuclear missile engine test facility. And the Biegun mentioned that U.S. was willing to provide corresponding measures for North Korea's denuclearization measures, and that Washington was prepared to implement the Singapore agreements simultaneously and in parallel. He also emphasized the U.S. would have to figure out the full scope and scale of North Korea's WMDs and missile programs through its comprehensive declaration before completing the entire denuclearization process. And he also stressed that they would need to reach an agreement on international experts, monitoring and access to North Korea's facilities for nuclear and ballistic missiles, and that U.S. must make sure that North Korea would eliminate and dismantle fissile materials, nuclear weapons, and delivery means, and other WMD inventory. So these remarks show that the Trump administration was working on simultaneous and parallel measures for the denuclearization process in order to make a progress before the Hanoi Summit. So it was expected that the two countries would be able to make some progress in North Korea's denuclearization in Hanoi. But after failing to reach an agreement in Hanoi, the Trump administration is emphasizing the total solution more than simultaneous and parallel measures. Specifically, at a conference held on March 11th in Washington, Steve Biegun said, quote, "We are not going to do denuclearization incrementally. We need a total solution." So I think his comments suggest that the Trump administration reaffirms its position that Pyongyang needs to make an agreement to comprehensively settle its denuclearization process to make progress in the negotiations. And in addition, the Trump administration reaffirmed that it want to achieve North Korea's denuclearization by the end of President Trump's first term in office. So we can say that the Trump administration is trying to secure better bargaining power in the negotiations with North Korea by emphasizing the total solution in preparation for the resumption of the talks. Meanwhile, Pyongyang has consistently advocated the phased and simultaneous measures. For example, Choi Sun-hee, Vice Foreign Minister of North Korea, said at the press conference that Pyongyang did not have intention to resume the talks without corresponding U.S. measures for its decisions to stop nuclear and missile tests. So it is quite obvious that the phased and simultaneous measures consist of the core interest that North Korea will never give up in the negotiations. So in sum, I think that the Trump model has been developed and crystallized by Steve Biegun team on the U.S. side, and while the phased and the simultaneous measures have consisted of North Korea's core interests in the denuclearization process. So considering the two countries' different positions on the denuclearization process, I think that a compromise with the features of a comprehensive settlement and simultaneous and parallel measures would be a valid alternative that could bridge the gap between North Korea and the United States. And as I mentioned earlier, after Hanoi, Washington is emphasizing total solution or the big deal, while Pyongyang sticks to its phased and simultaneous measures. And this situation limits the possibility that each side could first change its position to resume the talks. So tension is getting higher between them. So it is required that South Korea play active the facilitating role to provide them with a diplomatic space to narrow their gap in North Korea's denuclearization process and maintain a momentum to resume the talks. Actually, South Korea has proposed the good enough deal or good deal, which is mainly featured by comprehensive agreement and phased implementation. So it is clear that South Korea has offered a valid compromise that reflects well the different positions of the two sides and could bridge their gap. Then the question is how South Korea could motivate them to resume the talks between them. To do that, I think we need to examine what happened in Hanoi. So as you can see on the screen, I think that North Korea and the US made a pretty good progress at the working level talks in Hanoi. I think they got very close to make a deal between North Korea's denuclearization measures and corresponding US measures at the working level. As you can see on the screen, working level the talks that includes like the North Korea's denuclearization measures include the permanent suspension of nuclear and missile tests, a return of remains of American soldiers killed in the Korean War, dismantlement of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site and Dongchang-ri missile engine test facility. And the corresponding U.S. measures include the humanitarian aids and the war declaration and establishment of a liaison office. But it seemed that they could not move forward when they talked about North Korea's further denuclearization measures. It's mainly because the North Korean delegation, like Kim Hyok-chol, special representative for United States, he did not have authority. The working level, the delegations, they did not have enough authority to make decisions on the denuclearization measures, like how to dismantle Yongbyon nuclear facilities. They could make decisions about that. So I guess that as you can see on the screen, they tossed such denuclearization measures and the corresponding US measures to their leaders' decisions in Hanoi. So as you can see on the screen, the leaders' decisions for North Korea, the Chairman Kim, only Chairman Kim could make a decision about how to dismantle Yongbyon nuclear facility, and dismantlement could go over Yongbyon. Those decisions only could make by the Chairman Kim. And on the U.S. side, so lifting sanctions or the partial sanction relief, those measures could be made by the President Trump. But as you know, the leaders failed to reach an agreement. I think that the Chairman Kim requests too much. In return for dismantling Yongbyon, Chairman Kim requested President Trump to relieve important the 5 UN security the sanctions against North Korea. So they got their different prices for the deal. So they failed to reach an agreement. So I think that making decent progress for the main agendas in disputes in Hanoi would be acceptable to bring them back to the negotiation table. Humanitarian aid, like food aid, could be a good catalyst to restart the engine for the inter-Korean talks and maintain the momentum for the North Korea and U.S. negotiations. Specifically, I think that making an agreement on the forward-loading measures like Yongbyon plus Alpha, which include North Korea will dismantle Yongbyon nuclear complex and other major plutonium and uranium enrichment facilities, and Washington in return will offer sanctions exemptions for inter-Korean economic cooperation projects, such as resuming Mount Gungang tours and the reopening of the Kesavan industrial complex would be good to resume their talks. And the front-loading measures could be a good starter because, first, North Korea considers the phased and simultaneous measures as its core interest in the negotiations, so it is necessary for Pyongyang to receive Washington's corresponding measures to make a progress in the negotiations. In addition, it would be meaningful for Pyongyang to obtain sanctions relief measures from Washington because it would make room for Chairman Kim Jong-un to save face, who had to come back without any achievement from Hanoi. So if North Korea receives the sanctions exemptions for inter-Korean economic cooperation projects, they would be useful achievements that Pyongyang could promote to its people. Meanwhile, if Washington wins the North Korea's concessions, to stop permanently nuclear and missile tests and dismantle Yongbyon nuclear complex and other major plutonium and uranium enrichment facilities. Dismantlement of Punggye-ri, the test site, and Dongchang-ni missile engine test site, those search measures could be received as meaningful progress in Washington to protect U.S. national security. In addition, if U.S. offers corresponding measures such as establishment of liaison office, declaration to end the Korean War, and the sanctions exemptions for inter-Korean economic cooperation projects, it could be positively assessed in Washington because they will not undermine the UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea, which Washington perceives as the most important leverage in the negotiations with Pyongyang. And with the front-loading measures, both Chairman Kim and President Trump could get out of the burden and the regret that failed to reach an agreement in Hanoi. And along with the front-loading measures, it is also necessary to reach an agreement on a roadmap to make further progress in the denuclearization process. Washington is stressing the total solution after Hanoi. I think it is emphasizing that Washington will not take step-by-step measures without making an agreement on how and when they could achieve North Korea's denuclearization. It is like no more salami tactics by North Korea. Meanwhile, for Pyongyang, such front-loading measures and comprehensive settlement could also be an acceptable alternative. North Korea is expressing its intention to continue to engage at least by the end of this year. So if Chairman Kim saves face and gets some benefit from the front-loading measures and moves forward the denuclearization through the roadmap, it would get easier for Pyongyang to obtain sanctions relief or sanctions lift that is a prerequisite for its socialist economic construction. And in addition, Chairman Kim experienced various things from the Hanoi Summit. His confidence to obtain the partial sanctions relief in return for dismantling Yongbyon nuclear facility and absence of Plan B due to such miscalculation contributed to failing to reach an agreement in Hanoi. So it is likely that such Hanoi no-deal shock made a significant impact on Chairman Kim's perceptions and the calculations in the negotiations with Washington. So I think we have a higher probability now that Chairman Kim will agree to make a deal with Washington if a valid alternative is provided. So we are still in the initial stage of North Korea's denuclearization process. And the South Korea's active facilitating role is required to bring North Korea and US back to the negotiation table. South Korea is trying to make a virtuous circle between inter-Korean relations and North Korea-US relations. We expect that improving inter-Korean relations could enhance mutual trust between the two Koreas. And such improved trust would be committed to improving North Korea-US relations and trust through South Korea's active facilitating roles. And these efforts would contribute to achieving the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and establishing a peace regime on the peninsula. And the denuclearization process and the peace building on the Korean Peninsula could be long and hard. Although we still have a long way to go, but South Korea has a firm determination and confidence that we are on the right track to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula and establish a peace regime on it. And the peace building on the Korean Peninsula will be committed to enhancing the regional and global security, cooperation, and prosperity. So I believe that India, as South Korea's important friend and partner, continue to express your consistent support on what South Korea is doing for the peace building on the Korean Peninsula. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Min. It has been a very comprehensive and extremely insightful presentation. You have given us so many perspectives on this. I think now I'll turn to the audience to make comments or to make questions.
Can I ask a short question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. It was very comprehensive. But do you feel that there is some kind of a disjunct between what President Trump wants and what his team wants vis-a-vis North Korea? Because very often you hear the statements from, like recently when he was in Japan, and he said, no, this is underplayed what Bolton said. So do you think that the approaches, or it is a calculated approach on their part to sort of hot and cold kind of thing?
For the question, and
One or two more questions and then you can answer. We will take 2 or 3 questions. Yes.
This was a very comprehensive presentation, and I would like to have your perspective on what kind of role do you see other powers in the region apart from South Korea, or is there any space for other powers to participate in this ongoing denuclearization process? And to what extent can they actually influence this?
Third question, please. Any other question? Yeah.
Actually, my question is that India in 1950s and 1960s, it played a very good leadership role in the armistice agreement. Even Jawaharlal Nehru period time, he was negotiated with the South Korea and North Korea on this issue. So after that, it's a historical relationship between India and North Korea on this Korean Peninsula issue. So my stand is that recently, the last year, South Korean President Mr. Moon Jae had visited India for opening a Samsung company in Noida. At the point of time, India made a statement that North Korea should want to follow the restraint in this issue on the South Korean issue, and also on the Korean Peninsula on the tensions regarding going on that. So this kind of time, India is supporting South Korea and India is standing with the South Korea. And what South Korea was expecting from India, like you expecting like the same like the leadership role want to played by India, like which played in the past, in the historical past, in the armistice agreement. So is there any hope that India play this type of role in the future also? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. For the question about the possibility for the roles taken by the keep the government officials in the United States. So some people say that the President Trump's can't control his staffs, the key aides in terms of the talking about the North Korean issue, but I don't think so. I often visit the United States and Washington and talked as an expert there, and of course they show the different perspectives about that. Some people say that it's about the end of the Trump administration, about President Trump's leadership is almost over or something like that, but I don't think so. And actually, I met the Stephen Biegun teams and his the special assistant, and I don't want to reveal his name, but he mentioned that every policy decision about North Korea should be on the President Trump's table. It means that without his permission, any the policy would be implemented in the current Trump administration. So I think it's more appropriate to think that the President Trump and his key aides like the Bolton and the Pompeo, they share their roles, good cop and bad cops. And I think that although the President Trump's coordinate by 100%, but his team is working very effectively. So the Bolton pointed out the very important but the very hard the that the North Korea would follow, and the Pompeo often shared that kind of role. But the Trump administration still want to continue to talks with the North Korea. So the President Trump is just making the good comments. to just make the North Korea feel safe or the comfortable about the relationship with the United States. So they are sharing their roles, and the President Trump has got the very so many experiences in terms of making deals. Although it was just the CEO level, but he was very good about making deals. So we still got the top-down approach between Chairman Kim and the President Trump, and still I think that President Trump is maintaining the dialogues with North Korea effectively. But recently I heard the news that the Chairman Kim's letter was also delivered to the President Trump. Probably I guess that the Chairman Kim, I just suspect that the Chairman Kim may request the third the summit between the two countries, and one or the other maintain the good relationships with the President Trump or something like that. So still we got the pretty good the amount of hope in terms of the ongoing negotiations between the two countries. And for the second question about what roles other countries could take in the current North Korea-U.S. negotiations. First, I have to say that currently the negotiations have proceeded mainly in terms of three countries: North Korea, the United States, and the South Korea. And still, as I mentioned in the presentation, we are still in the initial stage of the negotiations. So just a baby step, mainly in terms of the denuclearization process. So three countries' involvement on the process should be enough in terms of making initial progress. And after the initial progress, of course, the important the actors surrounding the Korean Peninsula, like China, Japan, and later the Russia, will join the process. And think about how important the China would be in terms of the making peace agreement on the Korean Peninsula. Without the China's involvement, it would not be possible to make a progress in terms of making peace agreement or peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula. But we are still in the initial process. So it's still time that North Korea and U.S., the two leaders, are getting to know each other. So it's very important the stage, and it's almost over, I think, about the initial stage. And I hope that we will have the third summit between the two countries before the end of this year. And then I expect that there would be some good progress in terms of the nuclear process, some the actual agreement between the two countries, and then we can jump on to the next level. And then we can expect the more extended roles by China, Japan, and Russia in the middle stage and toward the end of the final stage. And the last question about the roles of the India. Although we are still in the initial stage that the three countries are leading the process, but still we need to have the constant supports by important political actors surrounding the Korean Peninsula. That's why I'm here to ask for your the constant supports about what South Korea is doing for the peace building process on the Korean Peninsula. And India and other important Asian countries could make a good impact on North Korea. You can push North Korea, you can pressure North Korea to join the international community in terms of opening its economy and eliminating its nuclear weapons or something like that. South Korea and United States are mainly taking the roles right now, but that role should be taken extended by the other important actors like India. And India is also a very important partner for South Korea in economic and other aspects of life. So, and we are also witnessing the growing importance of Indo-Pacific strategy by the United States and other regional countries. And so the importance of India is growing bigger and bigger. So still, again, we are still in the initial process in terms of the North Korea-U.S. negotiations, but I expect that the India's expanded roles would be required if, as we move on the process. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the fact that India is having diplomatic relations with North Korea? Do you think that can be leveraged to the participants? To what extent that can play a useful role? Because we are having a window of opportunity with North Korea. We are having diplomatic relations. Do you think that can be useful for negotiations?
Yes, absolutely.
Sir, Mike.
First, to answer this question, and yes, absolutely. The KNDA recently established the ASEAN Indo Center in our institution. So it is mainly dealing with the southern policy of the Moon administration, and it also deals with the Indo-Pacific strategy in terms of the Korean perspectives. So the staffs and the colleagues in the center, they often visited India and other ASEAN countries, and we spend a lot of money in the budget on that missions. So it proves how important India and other ASEAN countries would be and could be in terms of the diplomacy and the security of the South Korea. So they're very important. Again, think about why I'm here. I'm a very busy person in South Korea, but and the visiting here in India and just letting know about how's going on, the current political situation on the Korean Peninsula, and asking for your the active participation and support about what we are doing now is very important. So I'm here, and I believe that the other colleagues of my institutions and other institutions, and they are flying to India and other ASEAN countries to do that. So absolutely, it's very important to obtain the consistent support in terms of the security situations and the economic situations and other aspects, almost every aspect of life.
I wish you all the best on behalf of all of us to make the peace process more successful, and our wishes are always there. And my question is that India and South Korea navies are conducting Sahyog currently now. So how this kind of exercises, military exercises, is going to be put an advantage on the Indo-Pacific region? And also, is there any chance that South Korea will move on inside the Quad grouping if possible? Is there any possibility of South Korea to enter into the Quad grouping? As the India, US, Australia quadrilateral grouping was recently formed, and the Japan, US, and Australia, even in India, including India, was a leading role. So these four people are conducting a good grouping and making a useful dialogue. Even it was only one summit was happened, yet it was quite good, successful. So is there any possibility that South Korea is having the intention to participate in the Quad grouping? And also, what is the dimension of the Sahyog military exercise conducted by South Korea and India in the recent past? Is there any strategy to make Indo-Pacific region more partnership-based, security-wise based dominating region by the South Korea and India South Korea and India friendship? Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Simon Hohenberger. I'm from the French Embassy. And of course, the position of my government is to negotiate a definitive, complete, monitored denuclearization. And at the same time, we have paid tribute to the efforts of President Moon to re-engage North Korea and organize the three very important summits. I have two precise questions. The first one is, what is your assessment of the implementation of international sanctions against North Korea in Asia, or let's say in South Asia? That's my first question. The second one, it echoes one of the questions of Dr. Kesavan. That is to say, what kind of leverage India may have on North Korea. And so my question is, what are the kind of minimal relations there is between New Delhi and Pyongyang? Is there an embassy? Is there some kind of humanitarian assistance? I have absolutely no idea of the kind of minimum relation there is, and that could be used as a leverage. Thank you.
My question is, I also see like big benefit in including regional partners. On the other side, if we look at, for example, Iran right now and how the Americans behave towards Iran and actually act against international agreements. And in the same way, we see that, or at least that's my feeling, that the Americans are more like taking the lead in these negotiations. Don't you think it would be better for South Korea and North Korea that on the one side South Korea would take more the lead in these negotiations with more regional partners? Because I don't see any benefit in including Trump administered United States in these negotiations right now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, two questions. I'm from China. Given the current dynamics in Hong Kong, so I was thinking that we have seen a lot of political, up-level negotiations, arrangements across the peninsula. But I was wondering, how about the reconciliation between the peoples? When I was in South Korea, some South Korean friend told me that for the North Korean, sometimes they even cannot understand the South Korean language because they have already added a lot of modern words, English words. So during this process of the reunification, how were you going to reconcile the peoples? Because I watched a lot of documentaries. There was a strong hatred between the two peoples during the war. So how are you going to reconcile? The other question is that there's a strong argument that North Korea is actually trying to use this kind of negotiation to let all the regional powers to come to the table, so the North Korea could leverage and sometimes even have some benefits like international aids. But there's also another argument that the US is actually using the North Korea to be relevant in the Asia-Pacific region, or even narrowly speaking, in the East Asian region. So, and these two kind of dynamics have been kind of rationale behind the several rounds of failure of the negotiations. So I was wondering, would this kind of two dynamics be still going to happen in this round of the negotiation? Yeah.
Can I ask one more final question? Yes. See, this is about the role of Japan.
Sir, Mike.
See, if you carefully examine the entire development in the last about 2 to 2.5 years, the only country that has been rather left out of serious negotiations, I think, is Japan. And Abe is the only prime minister probably who has not met Chairman Kim was, even though he has been very eager to meet Mr. Kim. Now, Japan is also one country which has always exerted utmost pressure on the US, saying that we must maintain absolute pressure on North Korea. We should not relent. There should not be relaxation with regard to our pressure on North Korea. So similarly, when you examine the recent visit of President Trump to Japan, I think there were reports saying that North Korea has already resumed some of its short-range missile tests. So when a question was put to President Trump, well, how do you react to this? They have already resumed the short-range missile tests. He said, no, I am not bothered about that. It doesn't bother. I am only worried about the long-range missiles. Now, Abe was really shocked to listen to this, because Abe is more worried about the short-range missiles from North Korea. So there is also some contradiction between President Trump and also Prime Minister Abe. My question is, to what extent the Koreans feel that the inflexible, rather rigid stand taken by Japan, to what extent it's really going to retard the progress of negotiations between the United States and North Korea.
Thank you for the questions. And first, to be honest, I have much information about whether or not South Korea would join the grouping you mentioned about in terms of Indo-Pacific strategy now. But with my limited information and knowledge, I know that South Korea got the huge interest in joining the group efforts in terms of the economic in the economic sector and the not the political, not militarily militaristic the activities, but the South Korea got the cautious approach about Indo-Pacific the strategy or the grouping activities because we have to consider the other political actors the situations on the Korean Peninsula. So still the South Korean government is taking very cautious the positions about that. But just for the economic activities, I can say by the good confidence that the South Korea got lots of interests about the group activities, and probably some are the experts and the government officials are working on that kind of the other project. But unfortunately, I don't know much about how much our government has been involved with that kind of activities.
We also somewhat don't know about South Korea's policies. It will happen, but really, you given this much of insights. Really, thank you so much. It's really useful for us.
But still, to be honest, I know that we got lots of interest in the Pacific, the conceptual strategies, because it involves the important the actors surrounding South Korea. So we are working very hard about the project, but unfortunately, I'm not one of the experts working on that the strategy. So the other colleagues are working on that. So when I come back to Seoul, and I'll ask my colleagues about how much we are involved in the projects and what kind of projects we are working on with India and other the regional countries in terms of our efforts to join the projects or strategy. Okay, yes, please understand my yes. And the other question about the effectiveness of international sanctions, but just I want to just focus on the what we are talking about, how effective the sanctions could be on North Korea. And actually, most people agree that the sanctions are working, but the few people agree that the sanctions would make North Korea collapse completely. I don't think so, and most people don't agree with that. But the sanctions make North Korea very makes it hurt or very effective. So North Korea is suffering from sanctions, and they lack of the foreign the monies that they possess in the territory. And they are almost used up the foreign the currencies or the dollars. So probably most people expect that probably from next year North Korea would have the very serious situations in terms of managing the dollars or the amount of dollars and some kind of meet the end between import and export or something like that. But then that does not necessarily mean that the North Korean economy would completely collapse. I don't think so. North Korea will survive for whatever the means and other things. The North Korea and like the other some countries who got experienced the sanctions from the international community, North Korea got some of the experiences about how to survive from the international sanctions. But the Chairman Kim doesn't want to see that kind of the situation. He is still the young leader, and he still have the big dream in terms of the the constructing the socialist economy for prosperity. He needs some kind of legitimacy for his regime that could last about at least 20 or 30 years. So I think that the socialist economic construction is the priority in terms of the maintaining his regime. So I still believe that that's why that he is on the negotiations with the United States and try to be a normal state, well, nowadays. So that could be the best answer I could give you. And for the possibility of extended roles by the South Korea rather than the United States, but unfortunately, it's not possible because still the North Korea-U.S. negotiations about North Korea's denuclearization should be taken by the United States because the North Korea, United States, and China, they are the three most important main actors that was involved in making the peace agreement or there's a truce agreement in the past. So the legally and politically, United States should be involved in the process. Otherwise, it would not be effective. That's the reality we have. So that's why we are South Korea is just taking the facilitating roles now. Of course, the South Korea want to take the more active roles, but it's not appropriate. It could be the first time that North Korea accepts South Korea's active roles in terms of the negotiations about denuclearizing itself, other than the United States. So it's a very the good chance for South Korea in terms of joining the process, but we have to know where we stand in terms of what kind of roles we could do to facilitate the process. So North Korea, the United States. So the current denuclearization negotiations should be gone by the bilateral negotiations by North Korea and the United States. And based on that kind of bilateral relations, and they could make some progress in terms of bilateral relations, then we can move forward in terms of the changing truce agreement to the peace agreement that would include the South Korea, North Korea, United States, and China later. So that's the reality we have. So we have to accept that. And for your last question about the recognitions and the opinions of the two Korea's peoples about the North Korean issue, I also know that there are the different opinions among South Korean people about the possibility or the future for the Korean Peninsula, like the reunification of Korea or something like that. We know that, and especially younger generations of South Korea, they don't have the active expectations about the reunification of Korea because younger generations of South Korea, they already got the sour the situations in terms of getting jobs and making good money and the buying a house or something like that. Very difficult economic situations there. So they don't want to add another burden in terms of economic situations. But in terms of the public opinion polls, although the younger generations got a little bit the reluctant negative point of view about the reunification of Korea, but the majority of the people, including younger generations, they support what Moon administration is doing. At least maintaining the security situation on the Korean Peninsula stable. That is welcomed by the majority of the Korean people. And the reunification could be probably the story that we could write in the long future. So, we still got the different point of views, even in South Korea, and the different point of views in North Korea. So, in the short term, we don't expect that we would be able to make a success in terms of the reunifying the two Koreas. I don't think so. First, we want to manage our security situation peacefully, stably, and in the short term, and then we want to establish a peace regime, like the two different regimes peacefully live together. A temporary stage, but I don't know how long that period would last. But it depends on how the people's public opinion on the Korean Peninsula, South Koreans and North Koreans' opinions would change. Otherwise, we would be okay. It would be acceptable to have the coexistence, peaceful coexistence of the two different political systems on the Korean Peninsula. And then, after having those temporary stages, after that, if the peoples of the two Koreas, they got the consensus in terms of the reunifying the Korean Peninsula, then we can move on. But I think that it would take a long time before we experience that kind of the consensus. And still, for you, the second question about some of the political considerations that North Korea and United States could have in terms of the maintaining leverage each other, I agree with you. But everything is possible because we are still in the negotiations. So North Korea would want the help from support from China, Russia, and other international friends, and the same thing for the United States. Basically, the United States is working very closely with South Korea and Japan. What could be the purpose of that kind of the cooperation? To support maintain the support from the close allies, because the South Korea and Japan could make the good impact on the results of the negotiations. So both countries do those things, and I think it's a natural the approach that the countries facing negotiations could take. So everything is possible. Yes, that could be the best answer that I can give you. And for your question about the roles of Japan, still, and so again, we are still in the initial process in terms of the North Korea-U.S. negotiations, and it is true that the Japan has been excluded from the negotiation process. So we have tried. South Korean government have tried to maintain the positive relationships with Japan, although we got conflicts in terms of the history, the issues, and other things. But both countries are positive in terms of the cooperating each other in terms of the security matters. So in terms of the threats of the North Korea, and in terms of maintaining the security situations, peace, stably in the East Asia, Japan and South Korea and Japan need each other. And whenever I meet the experts from Japan, we got the consensus about the situation that we have to work together in terms of the enhancing our the leverage in terms of security matters. But still, it's not easy when we got the history issues emerging on the surface. And for Japan, just repeating its position about maintaining the maximum pressure would be more beneficial for its domestic politics and for its current diplomatic situations. And as I mentioned, it has been excluded from the negotiation process. So to secure its the security, possibly coming from the North Korea, the missiles and other things, So it would be the rational for the Japanese government to argue that the maximum pressure would be necessary for each of the situations. But you also know that the Abe, Prime Minister Abe, also wanted to meet the Chairman Kim. That means that Japan also got the desire to enhance the relations with North Korea. So it's very complicating when we talk about the political situations, the diplomatic situations of a country. So Japan also got that kind of the mixed feelings toward the North Korea. And again, after the initial process of negotiations, Japan's roles would be extended. So the Japan already know that kind of the situation before this upcoming the election in July this year. It is more beneficial to just maintain its maximum pressure the argument to make mobilize some kind of votes for just the domestic purpose. And for the short-range missiles, and still South Korean government is very cautious about that kind of the situation, because we don't want the experience the negative the situations in terms of the ongoing the North Korea-U.S. negotiations. Short-range missiles could be the normal military exercise or the activities that any country could do. So, but we got the more important diplomatic and political purposes that we have to make North Korea give up nuclear weapons, and we have to move forward in terms of establishing peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. So, for the more important the political purposes and the goals, we have to move to a little bit more cautiously. And recently, I stopped by the Germany, and when the North Korea launched the short-range missiles, and the Foreign Ministry of Germany, they got their clear statements that North Korea launched the ballistic missiles or something like that. But the South Korean government mentioned North Korea launched the projectiles or something like that. So we are still having the very important political and diplomatic opportunities that could make North Korea give up the nuclear weapons, and we can move forward the peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. We don't want to miss that. So in terms of the close cooperations with the United States, we made the decision that it would be acceptable. Although we didn't like it, but could be acceptable to launch the short-range missiles. But we also send the warning signals to North Korea that another provocation would not be acceptable. So this situation could be the last. So that we send the strong signals that we still maintain the momentum for the talks, but we want move forward move forward in terms of the negotiations with peacefully and or something like that. So we still got the hope. And again, recently President Moon and President Trump and Chairman Kim, they got they sent signals that the three countries resumed their talks in terms of the resuming the talks for another inter-Korean summit and another North Korea-U.S. summit. So that we still got the positive aspects of the negotiations. So please, I think that we have to allow a little bit more time for the main actors to make a progress in the negotiations.
Well, on behalf of ORF, it's my pleasant duty to express my very sincere thanks to Dr. Min Jeonghun for his very delightful and very insightful presentation. Really, we have learned a lot. Because many of these the details that he actually mentioned, they are not easily available to us. I think, therefore, in that sense, I think it has been a learning experience for most of us. And we are very thankful to you for finding time to come to ORF to enlighten us on different aspects of these negotiations that are going on. So thank you very much. And I'm sure that you have come to India to promote the bilateral relations. I wish you all the good luck. So maybe I think we can again meet somewhere. Maybe we'll come back to India again for some other seminar. So I wish you all the best during your stay here. I also would like to thank all the members of the audience here for coming here to listen to Professor. So thanks very much. Thanks also to Minister from the Embassy.